Hello and welcome to this, the final program in the current series of trees, the Silent Sentinels. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have chosen to spend the next 30 minutes with us. In the first 13 programs, we took you all across the island, from North Point to South Point, from East Point to Holetown. We also took you to the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. On those exciting journeys, we talked about the importance of trees to our lives and the environment. We discuss our need of a succession plan for our trees, and we called attention to their ethnobotany. In the 14th program, we analysed the impact of infrastructural development on our treescape. In the 15th program, we discussed the benefits of having trees on our properties. In this, the final program, we shall look towards the future of trees on our environment, and as we do so, we will pay special tribute to those forward-thinking individuals who went before us and ensured that public spaces were created, and more importantly, that silent sentinels were planted for the recreation of all of us. They did it not for themselves, but for future generations. Now, the recurring question in this program is simply this. Are we planting something and leaving for generations that will come after us? Or are we merely grabbing and taking and enjoying what was planted by those individuals who had the vision and foresight, who went before us and planted these lovely trees so that we could all enjoy them today? May we not merely ponder on that question, may we act with alacrity. Now, it is perhaps fortuitous that we should begin on a spot that has the distinction of being Barbados' first public recreational place, specifically designed for the masses to recreate themselves and officially opened on June 10th, 1909. The creation of Queen's Park is a very good lesson for all Barbadians of their civic responsibility to this nation. Historian Trevor Marshall places things in the correct perspective.
This park, as you know, was part of the military establishment. The British military was established here from 1780. St. Anne's Fort, Barbados was established as a naval station and a garrison area for the British Windward Islands. This was the headquarters of the British defense effort in preserving its empire in the region. Jamaica to the west being another area. This site here, 12 acres, belonged to the commanding officer of the British regiment here. This is his official residence. And as we look around the grounds of Queen's Park, we see his area for promenading, for taking leisurely walks on afternoons. And where the cricket is played, that is where the troops would parade whenever there was a ceremonial occasion, or he would amass them there if you didn't want to parade them and train them on the garrison. It is a tropical area, so you grew trees. The tree lining in Queen's Park, it doesn't even reflect 1780, 1800, 1816, or whatever. Apart from the baobab tree, most of these trees here, even your mahogany, are just about 100, 150 years old. Those down the driveway are equally relatively young.
Now, apart from the baobab tree and a few mahogany trees already planted prior to the establishment of the park, the majority of the trees you see today are relatively young. How did this come about?
The beautification of Queen's Park, the establishing of a tree-lined space, is the work of Lady Elizabeth Gilbert Carter. She was an American by birth. Her husband, Sir Gilbert Carter, was a British governor in Barbados at the turn of the 20th century. But he was here when the British regiment left in 1905. And when the park was given over to a group called the Civic Circle and St. Michael's Vestry, and it was open to the public as an area of recreation, rest and relaxation in 1909. And the police band played in June of that year, and then at Christmas in 1909 is the first of their traditional Christmas morning concerts in the park. 105 years.
You would note that quite a number of mature trees were already on the grounds before it was converted into a public recreational area.
Now in all of the pictures we see Queen's Park, it is heavily tree-lined. So it means that the British established a set of trees. Because in 1909, when you see a picture of people promenading for the ceremonial opening part, that area beyond it, stretching over to where there's cricket, the cricket ground, it is heavily lined with trees. So the trees are there. Lady Gilbert Carter, she then arranges for the more tasteful deployment of the trees. The eastern area has a group. The southern area looking over to what is the Ministry of Education, and then the west. The trees are so many centuries, Sentries. You know, they're arranged almost like soldiers guarding this northern area. Several different centuries or platoons of guards. That's how the trees are.
Hence the name of this program, Trees, the Silent Sentinels.
There's that kind of order, almost a military order about the treescape in Queen's Park. Now she had a naturalist bent for treescape. She loved flowering plants, and the trees are her brainchildren. The idea of making this place something for the people of Barbados, that's also her brainchild. And she considered that you should have a boulevard effect, that you should not have just a bare space because it's military, that should be severe and devoid of any kind of embroidery, enrichment, or enhancement. Quite the opposite. But your people's park, as she made it, should have trees as your sentinels and your defenses.
It must be noted that this concept did not end with Queen's Park. On May 12, 1919, a group called the Civic Circle was formed under the auspices of Lady Gilbert Carter. Civic-minded ladies, Margaret Packer and other persons that continued her work into the 20th century. The ladies of this group extended the work to other areas in Bridgetown, namely Jubilee Garden, the Fountain Garden, and Trafalgar Square.
And indeed, Queen's Park stands as testimony to the dedicated, unremitting, and sustained work of people like those.
Influenced by the work that occurred in Queen's Park, Margaret Packer and the ladies of the Civic Circle took that work to the outskirts of Bridgetown, and they beautified an unkempt shoreline on Bay Street. Today we know it as the Bay Street Esplanade. The idea of planting trees and establishing these public recreational spaces took off in Barbados. In fact, the second major recreational space was established in St. Philip. King George V Park opened in 1936 and is really a memorial to the public-spirited efforts of Major H.W. Peebles, an Englishman who settled in St. Philip in 1936 and spent the rest of his life on the island. He it was who negotiated the leasing of the land, planted the casuarina hedges to fence the park, and was the moving spirit in all the many tasks involved in the inauguration of an exercise of this nature. In this park, residents lull about in contented relaxation. Today, some of the casuarina trees that were planted to fence the park have died, Others have been removed and not replaced, leaving this open space visible. Apart from the benches and tables put in place by the National Conservation Commission some years ago, the other seating areas erected by those who use the park regularly are all carefully positioned under trees. Trees that were planted many years ago by civic-minded individuals who were thinking not about themselves, but about future generations. It begs the question, what are we planting and leaving for future generations? Now, what about Queen's Park?
Queen's Park has the most wonderful fountain, bandstand, arbors to grow things, and sadly, at this time, looks absolutely derelict. Whereas right next door, and plus along the river there, the Constitution River, that's just been replanted and looks really, really good. So we got young trees coming on there, but Queen's Park, trees dying, fountain not working, and looking really sad. All the vines have died out. Queen's Park looks extremely sad. We had all the original pots that were put in from when the park was done. They have all disappeared. But trees haven't disappeared in Barbados, and we have more varieties of trees now than we've ever had, because with all the landscapers and all the nurseries that have opened up in Barbados since I started when I was 27, they're amazing plants and amazing palms and so easy to maintain. But as I said, maintenance of a tree or a palm, you do it every day. So you never let it get huge and out of hand. So you can be then very cost effective, but just dealing with it when it's not too large.
I think we believe that the trees will always be here. And I don't think that Thomas was instructive in that respect. You see, the last time we had a hurricane was Janet. As a survivor of Janet myself, 1955, I can tell you 1/3 of our trees were blown down. But they grew back. Saplings were there. There was enough water. We didn't have so much by way of concrete, and thus the trees grew back because things grew wild. And all we did in those days was cut off the dry limbs of trees for firewood. Nowadays you cut down whole trees and you do not replant them. And this is, I think, a short-sighted, myopic view of the longevity of trees.
To illustrate the effects of deforestation and not replanting, historian Trevor Marshall takes us to an island in the northwestern Caribbean that has been a victim of this.
As I said, in Haiti, and I think all of us should travel to Haiti to see that, if you cut down trees and you do not replant them, you are impoverishing your landscape. You're impoverishing the soil. You're making it susceptible to erosion and landslips. You're making it susceptible to the topsoil being washed away. Remember, in Barbados, we have about 18 inches of topsoil in most cases, and then the coral rock under it. And you're making yourself like the Artibonite Valley or plain in Haiti. The Artibonite is about 200 square miles. Barbados is 166. So you can drive along the Artibonite in Haiti, you know, between Cap Haitien in the north and Port-au-Prince, the Gonaives. And there's sand and rubble and cactus, desert in the Caribbean island, which was once the most fertile area and sugar growing island in the region. And that can happen to Barbados, right? That we do not understand the value of trees. We understand, yes, decorative plants and flowers.
Now, how could we change this? What could we do to get all of us to understand the value and importance of trees to our lives and the environment? Dr. Claire Durant.
So now, in order to change the mindset, then what we really need to do is introduce really to children or to young people what the real benefits of trees are. If you were living somewhere and you never saw any trees. Would you like that? If you wanted to go picnicking and there were no trees at all, would you like that? So for young people, they have to see the tree as beneficial. And what we would say is, when your child is little, if you have an area, you can help them to plant a tree, and you say you are going to look after this tree and you are going to watch it grow until you become 20 years old. Give them that opportunity to look after it. You can use a fruit tree is something that's very good. It starts little, and as they grow, it will grow along with them. And then over that period of time, they would get to see, oh, this tree is growing up just like me, and I am looking after it. I have to take care of it, just as I have to take care of my own health and my own body, so that they come along and they see the trees as beneficial.
You get seeds of flamboyant, you get seeds of cassias and various things, and you show children how to grow them. When we have the big Arbor Day in September, we channel ourselves into planting proper trees. But the answer is not to put a tree and hope that it will grow. We got to plant a tree and look after it, as we should be looking after our nation and the children and the whole thing. No point saying, oh, the trees are out of hand and they're not looking good, or the children are bad, because we got to deal with everything, because this is our nation.
There is hope, as we have seen in Barbados recently, with the efforts of the Optimist International Caribbean District.
The Caribbean District of Optimist International wanted to have a project on trees for 2015. So Governor Barbara Arundel from Antigua said that her project for 2015 was Trees 2015, where she wanted to plant 2,015 trees this year.
And that was my flagship program for the year. So basically, service clubs are being challenged in a way. We wanted to find something that could unite all of the clubs across the Caribbean. So finding something that would allow us all to get involved in a similar thing without it costing a fortune. And yet it would hopefully be labor intensive, so it would involve a lot of members. So after serious thought and looking at the needs of the Caribbean, and my interest as well, to be honest, we came up with the project Trees 2015. And the idea was that by the end of our 2015 year, we should have planted 2,015 trees across the Caribbean. Some people said it was too much, but the reality is at this point in time, we have successfully planted in excess of 2,015 trees from Jamaica to Barbados, all the islands in between. Some places had it easier than others. So for example, in Jamaica, because they're trying to replant some of the forest areas, a government agency said, here's a piece of land, you can plant a few hundred trees there. And they even provided some of the seedlings and that sort of thing, because they're understanding the importance of putting back in place some of the trees that have been lost over time. And so on October 1st last year, in Antigua, I started off the year by planting a tree at a second after midnight. We planted a mango tree in one of the members' yard. We had an activity at midnight. We went outside, planted a mango tree. Someone said, you don't plant trees at night. The tree's still coming. And later that day, we went to the Governor General's residence and planted a palm tree there as well. So that was all symbolic in terms of getting it started.
What about Barbados?
Within a week, I was in Barbados, so we planted a tree there. It was pouring rain that day, and we were told the tree is coming along quite well. Here in Barbados, most of the work was done with children in schools, and that was in fact the mandate. The idea was that we were not simply going to be planting trees and leaving them to then die, or simply plant trees. We wanted to educate people as well, but primarily educate the children, so that they would understand how important it was to look after their environment, that they would understand where trees fitted into the entire circle of life. Since then, the clubs throughout Barbados have all gotten involved in tree planting activities. Started off with each club being given 4 trees. And from there, they were supposed to get more if they could, and once again, plant in the company of or with children. And that's been done successfully here.
Pride of Barbados, which is the club that I represent, I'm the president of Pride, we decided that we wanted to donate trees to St. David's Church, of which I'm a member. And the project is that the trees should be planted in the presence of children, so that children understand the importance of trees.
This is extremely exciting to have the children actually plant the trees, because it gives them an understanding of taking care of the environment, the importance of trees for the shade and trees for fruit.
So we have planted today 6 flowering and 6 fruit trees.
Of course, the care of the environment is extremely important to the church. And we find this in sacred writings and in the hymns of the church. We recognize that our Savior, Jesus Christ, always took time to acknowledge the flora and the fauna of creation. And so it is, the care of the environment is a very, very important part of our whole understanding of Christian theology and our worship. And we hope that more persons in our community will see it as a sacred duty to plant more trees and to care for the very, very wonderful trees we have in our nation.
This has been the main focus of this series, encouraging Barbadians to plant trees and look after them. As she has done in every program, here is Carla Daniel on why we should embrace trees.
They're cool. They're peaceful. Your children can go outside and play without you having to call them out the hot sun, because they're under the tree and they're in the shade. They can climb the tree and stretch their limbs. They can pick fruit when it's in season, and they don't have to think that, mangoes come from the supermarket and dunks come from a man that's standing up at the side of the road. You show children a dunks tree and they're like, what's this? This is something I could eat, I could eat it. They don't know when dunks are in season. When I was younger, my mother knew when everything was in season. When the mangoes were ripe, the cherries were ripe, the akis were ripe, the dunks were ripe. And you knew that you could go and pick up a mango, and if you look at the stem at the bottom and it's still juicing, as they would say, it's still wet, the mango is good to eat because it just fell out of the tree. If the stem is dry, mango is probably on the ground for a couple of days and you don't know what crawl over it, so you should leave that under the tree. And all of those are things that are being lost, because again, in order to teach our children, we need to have the tools, and in this case, the tools are those very same trees. So we're to a point where we don't necessarily have those tools around our neighborhood, but there are still some places that you can take your child. So you can put your child in the car, you could drive down Silver Sands, you could show them fat ports galore. You could drive up to St. Andrew, you could go on the cashew walk, because most people don't know that cashew is a fruit. They think cashew is a nut that comes in a bag. They don't know that there's a fruit associated with it, that it tastes really strange, that it looks even stranger, that the nuts are poisonous when they're green and they have to dry before they're edible. All those are things that our children don't know. And people will tell you that, children are interested, they want to play the video games and so on, but that's because that's what they know. They're born into the age of computers. When you plug them up, you put them in the car, you take them out of that environment, you will see that they will frolic. They'll be ready to put everything, that the first thing that looks edible in their mouth. They want taste, they want to climb, they want to enjoy, but we need the places to do it. So that is one of the reasons why we have to preserve. I know land in Barbados is valuable. Money makes the world go around. It pays your light bill, your water bill, it pays your mortgage, all of those things. But you also have to see the value that is inherent in the land itself, as opposed to the value of it for sale, the value of it as an entity. And that's not just a present day value, that's a value towards the future. So that's a 2050 value of 3000, 3000 BC or whatever. When you're reading those books about the future, we want to see some land here, so that we want to see some trees, so people still know what trees look like. You don't have to Google trees and say, oh shoot, this is what Dunks tree is. You see something in the supermarket and you see guava, but what's guava? And you Google and say, oh my gosh, I could not believe that a guava looked like this. You believe a guava looked like that? No. You can go outside and you can see a guava tree and you can pick the guava and you can bite it and you can say, this is what a guava looks like. And you can spread your guava jam knowing exactly what that guava looks like, knowing what the tree looks like, knowing that the wood is some of the smoothest wood you're ever going to get. And if you want to make a hoe, you use guava wood to make your hoe, because that hoe handle is not going to break. It's not going to splinter when you're there hoeing at the side of the road. That's information that we need to preserve. And in order to preserve it, we need to make it real. And while it's in books, it's preserved, yes, but it's not real because they're words on a paper. And in order for it to be real, it needs to be alive. And to do that, we need to preserve our green spaces and preserve our trees,
which are so marvelous for us, for the environment, and it's all a part of life. and we are very religious. And if we're this religious, we've got to remember that the Bible says 6 days he made the earth, and the seventh day he rested. So the whole earth and all the trees and all the birds were set up in 6 days. And we've got to believe it because we all go to church. So we've got to look after what took that man 6 days to make, and look after those trees forever. And the trees will look after us, and perhaps then we'll have some water to drink when we need some water.
And we certainly do need the water. Well, that will do it for this series. Special thanks to those who contributed, and all of you for your kind words of encouragement, your advice, and your guidance along the way. We could not have done it without your help. Now, the question remains the same. What are we doing about our environment as it relates to the planting of trees? Are we merely enjoying the trees that were planted many years ago without considering that we need to plant some so that those coming after us could also enjoy the benefits of having trees on their properties? It is totally unacceptable to grab, take, and enjoy without giving back and leaving a much better treescaped environment for future generations. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Do take good care of your loved ones and look out for your neighbors. Goodbye.